This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on the Fox Business Network. Kennedy! Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth. And today's hashtag One Lucky Guy. We welcome back Judge
Merry
Alex
Christmas.
Barrera. On
Great
the
to be
day
back.
after. And he's outnumbered. Hey, great to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we
Everybody looks
appreciate
wonderful.
you
Look at this.
flying in on the back of Santa's sleigh as he was finishing out yesterday.
Hanging on.
All right. Glad you made it here safe.
I'm glad to be here. This is always fun.
All right.
Especially on Boxing Day.
That's what I was going to say.
All right, well, here's another day, the inauguration. And it's less than a month away from now, and the president-elect faces some daunting deadlines and issues that were front and center during the campaign and the transition. On the list, Obamacare, illegal immigration, and nominating someone to replace the late Justice Antonin Scalia on the U.S. Supreme Court. The Trump team released a list of people under consideration for that job, and in one of the presidential debates, he named Dianne Sykes and Bill Pryor. Those justices are still considered frontrunners for the spot. William Pryor is on the 11th Circuit in Birmingham, Alabama. That's also home of Mr. Trump's nominee for Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Pryor is a staunch critic of the Roe v. Wade abortion decision. Dianne Sykes is on the 7th Circuit Court in Chicago. She's a big supporter of the Second Amendment rights, but some point to her age, 59, as a liability when it comes to a lifetime appointment. And while he's not officially on any list, another name being floated, you may recall him being called Lion Ted a few times. Senator Ted Cruz, who once clerked for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Mr. Trump will have a Republican majority in the Senate, but Democrats will likely mount quite the confirmation battle. Some Democratic senators say they will give Trump's nominee the so-called Garland treatment to retaliate for Republicans' delay tactics used to block President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland. So, out of all of those names, what can you tell us?
Well, they're all very intelligent and very accomplished, and of course they're all conservative. Obviously, had Hillary won, we'd be looking at very intelligent and very accomplished nominees as well, or potential nominees, but from a different philosophical viewpoint. Sykes, I think, would be a great choice. I think she'd be an excellent choice. You know, one of the things that people don't consider is, in addition to their judicial philosophy, you want a jurist who can communicate to the others, because a lot of what happens is, and I don't want to call it horse trading, but you know, a lot of the justices, when they get into caucus, they need to be able to convince the other justices, look, you know, my viewpoint is the one you should adopt instead of taking off in this other tangent. And, you know, being controversial, being conflicted, I know Ted Cruz's name was mentioned. He's also very, very smart and brilliant guy. But he does have a tendency to be controversial. Now, Dianne Sykes has a reputation for being very personable and charming and approachable and likable. And that goes a long way in winning votes over to your side.
All right, so that's how it could go if it goes well. If the Democrats, Lisa, decide to put up much of a fight, how ugly could that get?
I think it could get pretty ugly, because they are going to keep the fact that, you know, Republicans sort of held up the process with Merrick Garland. And so I think it's going to be personal. And this is an area where, you know, they truly can try to block some of, you know, whoever Donald Trump ends up selecting here. Because if you look at the cabinet choices, because of changes that the Democrats made and that Harry Reid made, Donald Trump, as long as he keeps the Republican line, can pretty much get anyone through on the cabinet choices that he wants. But I actually think that Senator Ted Cruz could be a good choice from a political standpoint, because Senator Cruz has already sort of tipped his hat to the fact that he may be a nuisance of sorts to President-elect Donald Trump.
Sure.
So this is one way of someone who's going to strictly adhere to the Constitution, have those conservative values, and you sort of get him out of the way politically.
All right. How about a real basic question, though, about Ted Cruz? How do you have a guy who you named Lion Ted on the highest court in the land?
I think old wounds from campaigns can heal. When you're talking about getting debatably the least popular senator out of the Senate, I don't think he'd have anybody putting up much of a fight. They probably want him out and on the Supreme Court. I've grown to like Ted Cruz a lot more than I ever did in the past year, and I think people could move on. Because I was one of those, as you know, I was not a huge Trump supporter throughout the entire election, and I thought he was speaking for a lot of us that, you know, hold true to our conservative beliefs that had questions about Donald Trump, and I ended up liking him more than I would have. I was the one person who defended him on this very show at the convention after his drop the mic speech. So I learned to like like him a lot more than I once did. But I actually think it's a great choice politically as well. He's very well aligned, with conservatives across the country. And when you're talking about issues like Second Amendment rights and Roe versus Wade, these are hot-button cornerstone issues that he adheres well to.
So, Kennedy, that's what I want to ask you about. There's certain ways that a Supreme Court can have a lot of influence on our lives as citizens.
Certainly.
What are some of the big issues that you think we'll look forward to seeing this court tackle?
Well, I do think that Roe v. Wade will be an incredibly important issue, and I think that's going to come up a lot, especially if Pryor is nominated. I agree with the judge. I would like to see Dianne Sykes have her day in court, or in the Senate, as it were, because I think that you need someone who's really strong on the Second Amendment. And also, I want to see how much of a constitutionalist she really is. And I think there are some really important questions that both sides need to ask. And one of the things that President-elect Trump has promised to do is put not only a constitutionalist, but an originalist up in that all-important robe. And I think that's very critical at this point, when we have so many issues that are still, because we've had this split court, whether it's immigration, marijuana still has a lot of vetting to be done on the state level versus the federal level.
Right.
And we'll see if the court will take something like that up again. But to Megan's point, Ted Cruz, he is a constitutionalist. This is not a political appointment for him. And I think it would be very interesting to see what he would do as a jurist versus as a politician.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it ultimately all plays out. All right, meantime, as a new president and a new Congress take office in January, among the most pressing issues will be the future of Obamacare. Donald Trump, on the campaign trail and in the weeks since the election, has repeatedly promised to repeal and replace President Obama's signature legislative achievement in his first term.
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing the disaster known as Obamacare. Insurers are fleeing, doctors are quitting, and deductibles are going through the roof. Yet Hillary Clinton wants to double down on Obamacare. I'm asking for your vote so we can repeal and replace Obamacare and save health care for every family in New Hampshire and in our country.
However, despite his vow to get rid of Obamacare, President-elect Trump has hinted at keeping some of its most popular provisions, like the pre-existing conditions clause and allowing those younger than 26 to remain on their parents' insurance. Kennedy, I'm going to go to you. Do you think anything less than a complete and utter repeal of Obamacare, do you think his core base will be angered?
I don't know if they're going to be angered. They have a way of rationalizing some of the decisions that he's made. But I tend to agree with the base on this one. I would like to see the whole thing scrapped, because I think it's so expensive. We've seen so much consolidation alone. And these health service providers, doctors have been consolidating with these giant conglomerates. And that's one thing that has really compromised healthcare and made it more expensive, and also offered fewer choices. A lot of people, especially on the left, like to say 20 million people are now insured. Well, most of those people are actually on Medicaid. And, they're not serviced by private insurance at all. So many private insurers are pulling out of it. So I think, if you try and just hack off pieces of it, it's going to bleed to death anyway. So you may as well start over with an entirely new process. And I think that Senate Democrats will be on board with that if they truly care about Americans getting good health care in this country.
Yeah, that's a $64,000 question, Judge, is will they ultimately help Donald Trump repeal and then replace it? Because even Democrats have admitted at this point it is a disaster.
This is going to be a battle among Democrats, because they don't want to be seen as supporting the demise of Obamacare. But there are Democrats that are up for re-election in 2018 in key states that are going to be difficult for them to win if they oppose Donald Trump. So he's probably going to get some support on this. Now, it's not going to be easy, though. Remember, Obamacare was instituted during Obama's first term. It's been around and building and growing tentacles into everything. This is not something that's going to be flipped immediately. It's going to certainly not be done in the first year. It's going to take probably a couple years to do. And I think the question is going to be, what does he replace it with? Because if he replaces it with something worse, he's in serious trouble. I think the idea that he's floated about opening up interstate competition is key to this. The idea that insurance companies can't compete between states is crazy, because that's where you're going to get the lowest prices, and that's
Right.
where you're going to get the best deals.
You know, Lisa, I want to go to you on this. Again, if it's not completely repealed, if he keeps some of the mandates that we were talking about earlier, like 26-year-olds being able to stay on their parents' plans, is there going to be outrage from his supporters?
You know, potentially, but I do think that there is pressure on Democrats that are facing, tough 2018 elections to potentially play ball here, especially depending on what Republicans end up putting forward. Because you look, I think there's at least 5 states where Donald Trump won by double digits. And so those guys could potentially have a tough 2018. But also looking at 2018, Republicans really need to try to get this done in the first 2 years. Because if there's any lesson under President Obama, when a party controls this much power, even though the map looks really good for Republicans, you just don't know. And this is something that Republicans have promised repeatedly to voters, and it absolutely has to get done, or I just don't know how voters are going to be able to trust Republican candidates
That's a good point, because it was really a down ballot issue. It wasn't just about Donald Trump and the presidency. I would say that the Republicans need to be careful going forward. They have got to have a plan that looks better than the one that we have right now, and how to protect those people who are 26 and, or pre-existing conditions, I think, is probably the example that I would give, that you would have to protect that going forward to make sure. And the other thing is that the IRS is running this baby. Like they've been the revenue capture for all of this. And so now you've got to figure out, are you going to continue to let the Internal Revenue Service run this, or is it going to be, revenue-wise very different? So there's some big questions to answer before you repeal it. What is that replacement going to look like?
That's a really good point, because Steve Mnuchin, who's the incoming Treasury Secretary, at least the nominee at this point, will have as much say as someone like Tom Price at Health and Human Services.
All right, a lot of questions about what President-elect Trump is going to do about illegal immigration once he's in the White House. Remember, we're talking about the first 100 days now. One of his big campaign promises was building a wall. Remember that? We'll get Mexico to pay for it. He brought it up in just the past few weeks.
We will build a great wall, and we will stop illegal immigration for once and for all. Going to build that wall. We're going to build a wall. It's going to be a great wall, and it's going to have big, beautiful doors in it, because we're going to have people coming into our country. But they're going to come into our country legally.
But in a 60 Minutes interview after Election Day, Mr. Trump sounded like he was walking it back a bit. Well, we'll just read you the quote, you decide. But certain areas, a wall is more appropriate. I'm very good at this. It's called construction. There could be some fencing. Before the election, Mr. Trump also talked about deporting illegal immigrants.
Anyone who has entered the United States illegally is subject to deportation. That is what it means to have laws and to have a country. Otherwise, we don't have a country.
Also in that 60 Minutes interview that aired November 13th, it sounded again like he was softening his stance, saying this: what we are going to do is get the people that are criminal and have criminal records, gang members, drug dealers, where a lot of these people, probably 2 million it could be, even 3 million, we are getting them out of our country, or we are going to incarcerate. Okay, that last part, you were a police officer before you were a judge. So that incarceration, we could see lots of numbers of people if it's really 2+ million people.
Yeah.
What does the deportation reality look like?
Well, the deportation reality of 11 million, it looks very
But we're talking
unlikely.
specifically about the criminals. Because I want to know why it's not happening now in bigger droves.
Well, there's probably a few reasons why it's not happening now. That's not the focus of this administration. But one of the things I think that Trump could do that would kill 2 birds with 1 stone is pair up immigration with the gang units across the country. There's so many gangs out there that are stocked with illegal immigrants and are just decimating communities. Pair up with those gang units and just sweep across the country, ripping those gangs apart. Those are deportations nobody would argue against. Who would say, no, we want to keep a gang member here? And you could clear out so many criminals at the same time as you're dealing with the fact that they're here illegally. That would be the first step I would recommend. As far as his wall, frankly, if he seals that southern border, people aren't going to care if it's a wall, a fence, or a bunch of angry grandmothers with rolling pins. As long as that border is sealed, they're going to be happy that it was sealed, regardless of all the talking back and forth about whether it's a wall or a fence or electronic surveillance or whatever. Right now, we have a section of the lower United States of about 1,100 miles. That's the distance from Miami to New York. Right. That is completely open.
Yeah.
Completely open.
All right, so we have homes on the border state of Arizona. You grew up there, and so I've got family there as well. We know this issue. Nogales, down in those areas that are so porous, we know this issue well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most emotionally turbulent issue, I think, that exists in the United States and in current American politics. I've never seen people react the way they do to issues on illegal immigration. Donald Trump ran. First speech he ever made, coming down those golden stairs at Trump Tower saying, you know, illegal immigrants were criminals and rapists, promising to build this wall. And much like the question we posed in the last segment, if he doesn't deport all these illegal immigrants, and we had Judge Napolitano on the couch who said it would cost $250,000 per illegal immigrant to deport them. If he doesn't go up on this promise and end up deporting everyone, will his base of supporters care? And the devil is in the details on this, the logistics on this. When you're talking about DREAM Act students, when you're talking about people staying here on extended visas illegally, there's a lot of nuance in this, and it's not just criminals and rapists. And I'll be curious to see how people react to it, because I just don't see how it's logical for him to deport all 11 million illegal immigrants.
But I think he's also already signaled a change in this administration, obviously based on all the rhetoric and the things that he said throughout the campaign, but also in his cabinet choices, because General Kelly is going to approach this from a military standpoint. This is someone who's very familiar with Latin America. This is someone who has worked in the Middle East, who's going to see the southern border as a possible, threat to our nation from a, potential terrorist activity. And so I think that approach is going to be different. In regards to the wall, I think there's going to be the will of Congress in potentially doing it. I believe there's existing law that Donald Trump could utilize, but he's going to have to appropriate the money from Congress. So there is going to have to be buy-in from Republicans on the Hill to get that done.
All right, we've got to move on. I promise you're next.
Yay!
When we come back, I love her. A potential showdown looming on Capitol Hill. What? As some of President-elect Trump's cabinet choices are expected to face major pushback from Democrats. Plus, Americans handing a record amount of our hard-earned dollars to Uncle Sam. But the deficit continues to soar. That is an issue for Kennedy to really sink her teeth into. Can Mr. Trump still cut taxes with government spending seemingly out of control? Our debate when we come back.
Welcome back to Outnumbered. I hope your tummy is still full of ham and you're busy returning those horrific sweaters that Grandma and one of President-elect Trump's campaign promises was, of course, cutting taxes. But as the feds continue to rake in a record number of tax dollars, $422 billion in tax revenues. Look at that. The deficit still continues to soar. We're spending more than we're bringing in, according to the Treasury Department. In October and November, the government took in $422 billion, as you see there, still rang up a deficit of $181 billion. And for the year, the overall deficit projected to be more than $615 billion. That's up significantly from the previous 2 years. Ooh. So, Judge, you look at these numbers. If you ran your household this way,
be bankrupt.
You'd be bankrupt. They'd take away your home. Your credit would be destroyed. Yet somehow people in charge, people in power, can't help themselves. They want to spend money so badly in their home districts and their home states. But we can't afford that. We can't keep propping that up.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the reasons why Trump may be able to do what nobody else thinks he can do. It's kind of like when the election was coming around, everybody was like, can he pull this out? The polls all say he's losing, and nobody was counting on that submarine vote of people who wouldn't admit they'd vote for him. Well, there's another thing here, which is, he's a businessman. He's a bottom line guy, and he's used to cutting budgets and forcing money to be saved in order to make businesses survive. When you have a mentality in Washington, which is, I think it was Senator Dirksen who was attributed the quote, $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and as soon as it starts to add up to real money, that's the mentality. They're not playing with their money, they're playing with your money. So $1 billion to them is just a word. And I think that if you get somebody like Trump, who's a businessman, and the people that he puts together who are fiscally responsible, money gets cut from places where it has just been sitting and being wasted. forever.
Yeah, and maybe that's the benefit of having successful people in your cabinet, is they have run these businesses successfully. But where do you start cutting? You know, you've got so many areas where he's promised to keep spending money, and there are enough people in Congress that really are unconstrained. So where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's the number one question I have for President Trump going into office. The one thing I will say is there are aspects of being a businessman that I've been critical of when in regards to especially things regarding foreign policy. But this is the part of him being a businessman I really like, because you're right. He actually has to live in the real world. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the giant success he is all over the world with all of his companies. The main question I have going forward is, you know, the American public, these are very complex issues, but we know that the government is spending too much money, and I know that veterans are dying trying to get health care. So I know that whatever money I'm giving, there's still a lot of issues that Americans find incredibly important that are still not only embarrassing, but, you know, people are actually dying waiting to get health care. So I think anything except what has happened in the past 8 years will probably be a step up.
But do you think this could be an issue where Donald Trump is met with some opposition within his own party, because he signaled the, you know, $1 trillion transportation bill, which I do think some Republicans who have been deficit hawks over the years are going to be like, I don't know if I can stomach this, right? So it could be a point where there's some confusion. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity to generate revenue. I mean, you look at just energy alone and some of the things that Donald Trump has signaled that he's going to do with President Obama, even his latest power grab of roping off, you know, the Arctic Sea for drilling, right? And so I think there's a lot of areas for revenue growth. There's also the report not too long ago through the Pentagon that they tried to bury the $125 billion in administrative waste, right?
Yeah,
so there's so much opportunities for fraud, waste, and abuse to really look at that, identify,
almost
dig
a quarter of the military budget was, you know, completely unaccounted for. And, you know, there are a lot of places that we can cut. We'll just see if this president, you know, has the strength and tenacity. And so far, those seem to be.
And I think he'll bring accountability.
You know what I wish they do? Just spend real quickly a hearing on Capitol Hill. Put it at a time, I don't know, maybe prime time, so everybody in the world can see it or in the country can see it. And let's talk about where those dollars come from. Those hardworking people who are working 2 and 3 jobs since the Great Recession, and how they've never been able to put back exactly their incomes. And that is their money that they're putting into the government. And let's think hard about how we spend it.
What is your ROI, return on investment? So much more to discuss. Once President-elect Trump is sworn into office, confirmation hearings can begin for his cabinet picks. The tough battles ahead, and where Democrats plan to make the most trouble. And President Obama will be out of a job in less than a month. Whether he will follow the example of other presidents and stay out of the spotlight, or if he has other plans, maybe a foundation. Stay with us.
Not long after the new year, the Senate will begin confirmation hearings for President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees. And even though he has a majority in the Senate, Democrats are sure to give some of his picks a very tough time. Up high on the list are Treasury Secretary nominee Steve Mnuchin. Even some Republicans are questioning the former Goldman Sachs executive's readiness to face aggressive questioning. He's got no government background, and his media appearances already raising concerns about his political inexperience. And then there's Trump's choice for Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. He forged close ties with Russia during his years at ExxonMobil. Tillerson can lose no more than 2 GOP votes if all the Democrats oppose him. And there are reports that Dems plan to give him the kind of, quote, very thorough, tough vetting, focusing on possible conflicts of interest. And then there's Senator Jeff Sessions, Trump's choice for Attorney General. Democrats expected to grill him hard on issues of race because of some comments he made decades ago. Kenny, I'm going to start with you. I just see Democrats disliking every single possible pick and then creating an even bigger hole for themselves.
Yeah, and Charles Schumer has already indicated that they're going to make life very, very tough in some of these confirmation hearings, and I don't think that's what the American people want. I think it's incredibly disingenuous and dishonest. Don't go after people emotionally and personally. Really figure out what their philosophies are. And, you know, there's a reason that these people have been nominated in the first place. Figure that out, and then, you know, try and assign their strengths to where they might go. Tough questions are fine. You know, it's really important to get at the heart of where someone is leading from, because there's no time to change that once you are Secretary of the Treasury or Secretary of State. But, you know, they obviously have been successful for a reason. They deserve an honest hearing with, you know, a little bit of critical analysis, but don't continue to divide the country along party lines. I think people just don't want that.
You know, I would say this. I was kind of surprised that now Secretary John Kerry when talking about Rex Tillerson as a possibility for Secretary of State. I mean, he's been picked by Trump. We'll see how he goes through. I had thought, well, maybe he'll have the toughest time because all of the things that are going on foreign policy-wise right now. Secretary Kerry, though, said that it was a thoughtful choice, Rex Tillerson. And I thought, okay, well, he could be playing politics there, or maybe he's really considering the fact that Russia is so pivotal in all of this, and that if we can get to the heart of what Tillerson's ties are with Russia, maybe they're not nefarious. Maybe they're a positive. I don't know. We don't know yet, but we do need to hear from Tillerson.
Well, and I think, too, I mean, there's been the left's heads are sort of exploding with some of the cabinet choices that Donald Trump has made, because you look at someone like Betsy DeVos as the education, right? And she wants to, fundamentally change the education system in the country. And you look at someone like Scott Pruitt for the EPA. He wants to rein in all the power and the power grab that we've seen from the EPA, with the Clean Power Plan, which is blocked by the Supreme Court. So they're going to fundamentally change the way that the government has been ran for the past 8 years. And so, their heads are sort of exploding, but they don't really have a lot of opportunity to do much here because of the rules changes that Harry Reid made. Donald Trump can pretty much get whoever he wants. So what the Democrats need to be doing, if they're being smart politically, is look for places where they can split Republicans.
And Mitch McConnell warned him about that. When they employed the nuclear option, Mitch McConnell said, hey, you know what? At some point, the shoe's going to be on the other side.
Exactly. And I think that, if you look back after the Romney-Obama election, which was very contentious, Republicans pretty much swept in the cabinet that Obama wanted. They didn't give him much grief on practically anybody other than, I think, Clinton, Secretary of State. Of course, now the Democrats point to the Merrick Garland, problem as far as holding him up as a nominee. But there's a big difference. Cabinets are there during the term of the president or until the president loses favor over you. Supreme Court nominees become Supreme Court justices for life. So that's a big consideration. But as far as them fighting on every issue, I think Trump needs to get used to the fact that this is going to happen his whole term, because it's not just the Democrats, the media, everything. If you flip channels, they are attacking every decision he makes and will continue to do it.
I think he's ready, but I worry about the rest of the country.
No, but when you talk about,
I worry that big issues won't get tackled because we're going to be so caught up in that stuff.
When Lisa is talking about Democrats' heads exploding, imagine Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders talking to Steve Mnuchin, former CEO of Goldman Sachs. Popcorn and Jack Daniels ready. Wherever I am, I'm going to make sure I'm watching that thing live.
They need to make a special flavor of popcorn Jack Daniels just for you, just for those hearings. All right, future recruiter-in-chief, President Obama says that he would like to help scout future talent for the Democratic Party. A regular Billy Bean after he leaves office next month, saying it's a task that's right up his alley.
What I am interested in is just developing a whole new generation of talent. There are such incredible young people who not only worked on my campaign, but I've seen in advocacy groups, I've seen passionate about issues like climate change or conservation, criminal justice reform. That's something that I think I can do well. I think Michelle can do well. That's part of what makes me optimistic about our future.
Finding those Elian Gonzalez's and all the other future commies. This has some asking if Mr. Obama will follow the example of former presidents and stay out of the limelight post-presidency. I think that's a fantastic idea. I really think that for some of the disagreements that I might have had, or some of the issues I might have had with the choices that George W. Bush made here and there, I really admire the kind of post-presidency that he is having, because he's doing it on his terms in a very private way. And perhaps he's doing his own version of psychic healing, but he's setting a great example.
I don't have a problem with what he's doing. I think we could definitely use fresh blood in Congress. So the idea of going out there and looking for new, young, vibrant, obviously he's going to look for somebody of his own philosophy, but I think both sides should be doing that. I think that's great. And by the way, I appreciate the Billy Bean and the Elian Gonzalez reference. Those were both
Thank you very much, Judge.
But I think the concern with that, and Harris, you had mentioned earlier in the show of, Americans wanting to see things get done, right? And so there's something to be said if the former president is stepping into the limelight in this way during an ongoing Trump administration. that's going to create gridlock. That's going to create problems. That's going to make it very difficult for Donald Trump to move forward with his agenda and get anything done. So I do have a problem with that because George W. Bush was extremely classy. And I just don't think, I hope, I wish, but I don't think that President Obama is going to follow that same suit because he even used the bully pulpit to campaign against Donald Trump on domestic and international soil. So I don't have confidence in it.
I think you're right. He's going to be more Jimmy Carter than George W.
It continues this popularity game.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't think that the American public, they've already chosen. They don't need to continue to choose between two people. It's not about Mr. Obama anymore. But I would say this about the whole process. If the Democrats are really genuine about wanting to grow new talent, why did they shut down Representative Tim Ryan when he went against, how many terms has Nancy Pelosi had?
A million.
A lot.
She's been a representative for most of our lives.
For 471 years. She is the opposite of new blood.
My point is that if he were really, really genuine about that idea, why wouldn't he have... I know the politics, but he's not running again.
I don't know if
because
he's genuine.
Democrats rule by fear. They rule by fear.
But I don't know if this is genuine on his part. The idea that he's like sort of interested in fostering new talent, he didn't do that during his administration at all. He wasn't bringing in new talent into the forefront. Past that, we need to talk about first ladies being classy as well, because Laura Bush, to my knowledge, has never said one thing negative in any context against the Obamas. Michelle Obama isn't even out of office, and she's doing interviews with Oprah talking about how hope is dead and hope isn't alive. Obviously, throwing a lot of shade at Donald Trump. He responded in what I thought was a very classy way, but I think that they are not going to be able to help themselves. I think President Obama loved being a celebrity. I would debate more than actually being president, and he can't handle the fact that Trump beat him at his own game, was a celebrity to begin with, and now is a much bigger celebrity than Obama ever will be. Yeah. I just think he will be on the Tonight Show every other week complaining about Trump.
I think it's designed to get Trump to respond. The more they can keep him flying off the handle and responding, the more they can guarantee this is a one-term president. Just pick at him every day.
Well, they want him to be oppositional.
Exactly.
So they're going to try to put up who they are.
Yeah, they know what he'll respond to. They want to get him on the defensive his entire term. And I think President Obama...
Debate, Kennedy?
Let his staff do it.
Yeah, don't take the debate. Don't take the bait, rather. Sit in the White House in your comfortable ivory nest and say, I'm president.
Because remember what Hillary Clinton said. This was a man you can bait with a tweet. Yeah. So, I mean, somebody's got to be there. And we know Kellyanne Conway now from reports is moving to Washington, D.C. And we know what calming and also fierce movement that she started in him. And we saw some of that back down on Twitter during the last part of the campaign. He kind of backed off a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if she's part of the plan.
All right. Well, we will see. Rarely an easy time for our men and women in blue. But this year, it's really not been good at all. Many saying we are in the middle of a war on cops. The sobering statistics and the effect it's having on the people who protect us every day. Please stay with us.
Chilling statistics for police officers in 2016. The number of cops killed by non-accidental gunfire skyrocketing to 62 as of December 21st. That's 23 more than last year and 17 more than the average number of 45 per year over the past decade. Those safety concerns, as well as low pay and troubled pension programs, are making it hard to keep officers on the job. And morale is particularly low in Dallas, where 5 cops were killed during an ambush in July. Nearly 100 city officers have quit or retired since then. So how do we stop this bloodletting? Because if you think about it, 62, that's almost, this is just through November.
Yeah.
And not through the whole year.
No.
That's almost 6 police officers killed every month of the year.
Yeah, and it's these are heartbreaking stories because, oftentimes law enforcement, they've got families, they've got kids. We saw one female officer in California who had just gotten off of maternity leave that week. Yeah. And, she was killed in cold blood. And I've talked to police officers here. I know I've talked about my brother a lot on the show. He was a cop for a long time. He still works with a lot of police officers. And it's sad to see that morale is low because when it does get that way, when you interface so differently, it changes how you are on the job, and it changes how you react. And, you know, I think that's been one of the big impositions, is trying to change the culture of law enforcement. In some ways good, but in a lot of ways, perhaps it keeps us less safe in those critical moments. The saddest thing about Dallas is this was a successful department who had really made some of the reforms that so many people who talk about criminal justice reform.
And Chief Brown down in Dallas, too, was really trying to recruit particularly young men of color onto his force so that he could start to change the narrative from the black community to the police force from inside. But I want to ask your perspective, because you were a police officer long before you joined the bench as a judge. Would you do that job again today? And where do you think, is there really a war on cops? Where do you think we really are?
The answer to the first question is no, I wouldn't. I would not take that job today. I would tell my kids not to take that job today.
Why?
It's because it's too dangerous in the current atmosphere. It's not just a matter of police work being dangerous. Police work is always dangerous, just like our military are putting their lives on the line out there every day. But when you have an atmosphere that's been created, and I really, being a former cop, I sense the atmosphere, and all police officers will tell you they sense the atmosphere, where it used to be that criminals, you told them to freeze, you told them to stop, you told them to show you your hands, they would. And that puts your mind at ease, because as a police officer, you don't know what the person's intention is. He knows what his intentions are.
Yeah.
He knows whether he is going to reach for a gun the minute you let your guard down, but you don't know. So you want to make sure you can see his hands and you have control of the situation. Nowadays, because of the atmosphere that's been created, you have a lot of people out there, good and bad. You know, some have no ill intentions, they're just being cocky, and some of them are criminals who intend to try to kill the cop, who won't cooperate when a police officer tells them to do something. And they know that police officers in the back of their mind have the fear of, wait a minute, if I shoot this guy, I mean, think about the cop in Ferguson. He was ultimately cleared. His shooting was completely justified. He can never work as a police officer again. He's been fired. His whole career changed. So you get this morale problem, which is more dangerous for the public than police, because with a bad morale, you know, they just don't respond. Well,
and to the judge's point, the atmosphere that has been created, I mean, the media really does need to take a large portion of this blame, because what they have done is driven fictitious narratives that ultimately prove to be untrue, like the hands up, don't shoot. That was a false narrative, which also isn't substantiated by the facts and statistics for both, you know, various universities and also the, you know, FBI statistics as well. And there's really been dangerous repercussions from that, as we're the entire topic that we're discussing right now, in the increase in police deaths, because they quite literally have a target on their back, because the media has created this anti-cop narrative, as I mentioned before, off of, you know, something that ended up being completely falsified.
And you're absolutely right. What happens is that these claims get repeated, and they get repeated on stations across the country. You know, when a police officer gets shot, there's some stations that carry it 24. Oh, I'm sorry. When a police officer shoots an African American, there's some stations that carry it 24/7, even before a determination has been made that the shooting was justified. But meanwhile, all week long, they cover this. And the reality is the FBI numbers, the FBI statistics disprove that statement that cops are targeting or shooting blacks for no reason at all. It's completely disproved.
But we won't hear about that.
You won't hear it. And the sentiment that the public takes from seeing it on television is, oh, it must be happening all the time.
And I can't imagine
well, it
what
isn't
that does
that
to the police
it isn't
officers.
happening. It's not happening at the rate that it's being reported. In fact, when you look at how many whites are killed in custody, statistically speaking, it dwarfs the number of blacks. So it's just that the facts aren't out there.
That's true. That is true. Students at a major public university now issuing a list of more than 60 demands in the wake of Donald Trump's election win. They include not showing one-hit film, which they say is offensive to Muslims, and students at another school are tearing down a portrait of William Shakespeare, and the reason why has some asking if political correctness is out of control in our schools. That debate ahead.
Brush up your Shakespeare. Start quoting him now. Brush up your Shakespeare and know it.
A coalition of student groups from the University of Maryland reportedly issuing a list of more than 60 demands in the wake of Donald Trump's election win. The Washington Times reports that they want to nix showing of films like American Sniper, which they claim perpetuate false narratives and stereotypes of Muslims. They want to officially remove the Christopher Columbus Day holiday, and they're demanding a full-time undocumented student coordinator. Meantime, Campus Reform reports some English students at the University of Pennsylvania are removing an image of famous playwright William Shakespeare, saying it doesn't reflect enough diversity. The students replaced it with a picture of Audre Lorde, Lord, a female writer who once described herself as a black lesbian, mother warrior, and a poet. All right, Megan, I got to go to you, girl, because millennial, is this ever going to end? Where does this end?
My head's going to explode, especially
and
with
is your head going to explode?
My head's going to explode. The Chris Kyle American Sniper thing especially, I mean, he's nothing short of a true American hero who was fighting terrorists and killing them so I can sit here on this couch and have my freedoms. How dare you? And I went to, a lot of these schools are Ivy League schools. I went to an Ivy League school, and part of the great hypocrisy and arrogance of Ivy League schools is they don't let ROTC on campus.
Amen.
So, don't even get me started on that. But the idea that at the same time you're not going to let soldiers on campus to enjoy the great education that some institutions give, and at the same time be critical of a film honoring his legacy is absolutely abhorrent.
Well, and Judge, we've seen a lot from, some progressives on campus and just at large of sort of this wanting to rewrite history. What does that mean for the country if this is what we do? If you remove paintings, if you're not allowed to read certain books, if, just this rewriting of history.
Yeah, I wish they'd taken Shakespeare out when I was in college. Frankly, I could use a little less Shakespeare. What I think about is what's going to happen to them when they go out in the real world and they leave this little cocoon that all these professors have created for them, and they go to a job that doesn't provide them a safe space and doesn't really care about their feelings. I think that there's going to be
any job, by the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Welcome to the real world.
It's going to be a massive, rude awakening for this entire generation of cream puffs.
Yeah, I'm going to need a safe space. I'm going to need a safe space from ignorance if people stop reading Shakespeare and some of the great writers in our history. I mean, are you kidding me? Just about every storyline in Hollywood is based on that original storyline coming out of Shakespeare's head. He wrote love like nobody else. So are we just going to have a planet filled with haters if they don't know the history of that love writing? I can't deal with that level of ignorance. I think my head is going to explode.
Are we ever going to find a safe space from ignorance?
Yeah, we will. And you know what my suggestion is? Educate yourselves.
Yeah.
That's what the internet is for. Go out and read the classics. Find good writers. Challenge yourselves. And if you're in college, keep watching those movies.
Yeah.
Go ahead and have disagreements with your friends. That's what college is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about free speech, challenging ideas. Instead, it's just shouting people down who happen to disagree with you. And
Preach
that is
it!
abhorrent.
Yeah.
Preach it, Cole.
And have
Oh
some
my
respect
gosh.
for the young men and women who are fighting our wars so you can go to these colleges. All right, as 2016 winds down, Twitter announcing the most popular political tweets of the year. Hillary Clinton getting the most retweets with her quote from her concession speech saying, "To all the little girls watching, never doubt that you are valuable and powerful and deserving of every chance and opportunity in the world." The second most popular Clinton campaign responding to a tweet from then candidate Donald Trump saying, "Delete your account." The third most popular from Election Day, Mr. Trump tweeting, "Today we make America great again." And the top trends in news and politics for this year: number one, election 2016, second, Brexit, and third, Black Lives Matter. So no surprise that 2016 is the number one trend, the election number one trend.
Those first couple have a lot to do with each other, though, right? Those were the choice of people who wanted outsiders.
They were tired.
Not just in their politics, but in their lives.
Yeah, they were tired of the establishment, they're tired of the status quo, and now we're going to see how it works for them and us.
I am so offended by the tweet she sent out that somehow little girls don't believe in themselves. And for those of us who are raising girls, it's like, do you think we raise our children to be anything less than powerful, thoughtful warriors? Hell no. Absolutely. You know, we raise our kids to think that they are filled with as much promise and responsibility as anyone of any other generation or gender.
No, I agree.
Lock it up, Hillary.
When that tweet came out, I remember being like, yeah, you too, if you marry the right man and lie, cheat, and steal and go above the law, you too could possibly become a nominee for president someday and then fail epically at the same time.
Something to look forward to.
You lie, cheat, and steal enough. What do you make of that?
Hashtags on hashtags. No, but I do think it's interesting from just how Twitter has sort of changed the game in this election cycle and the way that Donald Trump used it really to skirt the media. And you look at statistics that are out there, 91% of the news that he got was bad. It was negative news stories on him. And he was able to utilize social media, both Twitter and the tweets that he sent out, and doing things like Facebook Live to completely circumvent the media and not really needing them. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see if other candidates in future elections, how they sort of mirror that and mimic it.
I'm going to be interested to see how, as the New York Times has promised to rededicate itself to journalism, how journalists who were shamed because of some of the WikiLeaks and the hacking. We saw John Harwood, who was an elite journalist before that. I don't know how he's going to fare going forward. How are they going to do some reputational management at this point and become journalists again?
Should go into a new industry. John Harwood should go into a new industry.
I mean, maybe we need
he moderated a debate
for journalists.
We do need a lot of welders in this country.
Last word, Judge.
No, my last word is that that's the problem right now, that nobody trusts the media, and rightfully so. They've been shown what's behind the giant green curtain, and it's a bunch of people trying to manipulate the way you think and the way you feel so that they could elect the candidate that the media wanted, and it didn't work.
Also behind the curtain, a girl from Kansas, is the Wizard of Oz. It didn't turn out like that, though. They'll have to be better. Great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Come back from Florida anytime. Bring that sunshine.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. We'll be back on TV at noon Eastern tomorrow with Outnumbered. We're so glad you were with us this hour. Right now, more on Fox News.